All right, so today we're diving into something pretty wild. It's a framework called the National Unity and Prosperity Act, or NUPA for short. And the claim it makes is huge, that it can solve some of America's biggest, toughest problems with a solution that costs taxpayers, well, zero. Nothing. So you gotta ask, right? How on earth is that even possible?
Well, the whole thing hinges on this one central question. Think about it. Could all that vast, kind of forgotten, dormant federal land we have in the U.S. actually hold the key to solving our biggest national challenges? The entire framework we're about to break down is basically built on the idea that the answer to that question is a massive, resounding yes.
Okay, so before we get into the how, we really need to understand the why. We've got to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the problems this thing is designed to fix. The folks behind NUPA say we're facing three massive, almost unsolvable challenges right now.
First up is a really deep, really complex one. The source material calls them historical economic obligations. We're talking about unsettled commitments that go all the way back to the 1860s. And the way it's framed here is super important. This isn't about politics, it's about a multi-trillion-dollar structural liability, a massive debt on the country's books that's just been sitting there unaddressed for more than 150 years.
The second problem? Oh, it's one we're all seeing every single day. The crazy fast rise of artificial intelligence. This framework sees it as an impending automation crisis. You know, the real possibility that a huge chunk of the American workforce could be displaced by machines. And that could create some serious economic and social chaos.
And finally, there's the big one that pretty much affects everybody, that massive national debt that just keeps climbing and climbing. But it's not just the debt itself. The source material talks about these huge social costs that come from a stagnant economy, plus the drag from those historical debts we just talked about. It's a huge weight on the whole system.
So, okay, we've laid out these three gigantic problems. Now the framework pivots to its solution. And yeah, this is exactly where that sleepy, dormant federal land comes roaring back into the picture, positioned as the zero-cost answer to all of it.
So what is NUPA, really? At its heart, it's a plan to settle those huge national debts and, at the same time, protect the workforce from that automation wave. And the way it does this, the core mechanism, is by licensing out underutilized federal land to private companies to develop. And here's the kicker, the key claim. It's all supposed to happen at zero, and I mean zero, cost to you, the taxpayer.
And check this out. This one quote from the architect of the whole thing really nails the entire philosophy behind it. I mean, it's perfect. The government goes from owning a liability, land that costs money to just sit there, to taxing an engine, a privately funded economic engine, all without spending a single dime of taxpayer money. That's the whole idea in a nutshell.
Okay, that sounds great, right? But it's a big theory. So how is this economic engine actually supposed to work? Let's get into the nitty-gritty, because the structure is super specific. It's designed to be this kind of closed, self-sustaining loop. All right, so at the very heart of this thing is what they call the recursive reinvestment model. Picture this. All the money that comes in from leasing out the land, say for stuff like solar farms or massive data centers, that revenue gets split three ways. 40% goes straight to participating sovereign tribal nations as a royalty. Another 40% goes to verified descendant beneficiaries as a dividend. And then the last 20%, that gets automatically plowed right back into the system to keep things running and build new infrastructure. So you've got this clean 40-40-20 split.
And this is where it gets really clever. This is the anti-automation firewall. The logic behind it is called fixed cost arbitrage. So think about it. Before NUPA, land is super expensive, right? So companies look for other places to cut costs. And that's usually people's jobs. They're incentivized to automate. But after NUPA, companies can get access to land for way cheaper, but there's a catch. They only get that deal if they prioritize hiring actual human beings. Suddenly, it becomes more cost-effective to hire people than it is to buy and maintain a bunch of expensive robots.
So who's running the show? That's a huge question. Well, the governance is all local and decentralized. It's run by these special boards, and each board has 4 key people at the table. A representative from the partner tribe, a verified beneficiary, a local government official, and a fiduciary expert, someone who's legally bound to manage the money properly. This 4-part setup is meant to make sure there's balanced, professional oversight at every single location.
Okay, so you might be thinking, a system with this much local power and this much money flowing through it, what's to stop it from getting corrupted or just reversed by the next administration? Well, the architects thought of that.
They built in several really strong legal and structural locks that are designed to make the whole thing incorruptible and, this is key, irreversible.
The biggest safeguard, the ultimate one, is something called the sovereign key, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Participating tribal nations hold absolute, final veto power over any project on the land, period. This means they can shut down any deal that's bad for the environment, doesn't have good labor standards, or tries to cheat the system and bring in a bunch of robots. It is the system's ultimate fail-safe.
Then there's the main legal lock, and it's a big one, the Fifth Amendment. See, the moment the land is licensed to one of these local trusts, those rights are legally considered vested private property. Now, what does that mean? It means a future government can't just come in and say, no, we're changing our minds. If they tried, it would be a taking of private property, and they'd have to pay just compensation, which would be a payout so ridiculously massive, it's designed to make reversing the whole thing financially impossible.
And this part is just fascinating. You don't see this very often. A new federal agency would be created to get this whole process off the ground. It's called NUPA. But here's the twist. It's built to disappear. It has a sunset provision, meaning it is legally required to dissolve itself once the local boards are up and running on their own. They call this institutional grace, and it's all about preventing another massive permanent government bureaucracy from being born.
So, we have the mechanics, we have the safeguards. The big question is, what would this actually do? Well, the projections are, honestly, they're staggering. The framework predicts a massive, massive economic surge. Just let's start with this one number. Based on their models, the projected payout to participating tribal nations from their 40% royalty over just 10 years is $1.6 trillion. Let that sink in. Trillion. This would be a wealth transfer of historic proportions, and remember, it's all funded by private companies developing land that was previously just sitting there, doing nothing.
And what about for the U.S. Treasury, for the government? The framework projects something it calls a septuple surge. Think about it. You're taking an asset that was making $0 and turning it into a beehive of economic activity. All of a sudden, the government is projected to get 7 new streams of tax revenue. We're talking income tax from dividends, payroll tax from all the new jobs, corporate tax, sales tax, you name it. And all of this is generated from a brand new economy without having to raise a single tax rate on anybody.
And it goes way beyond just the direct money. The framework projects these massive secondary ripple effects spreading out across the country. The claim is that by creating this whole new layer of economic stability and jobs, you'd start to see incredible things happen. Everything from a sharp drop in systemic crime to American industries actually coming back home. That new flood of tax money could even make programs like Social Security solvent for the long haul. And it would create what the source calls a human sanctuary in this new age of AI.
So that brings us to the final, really critical question, doesn't it? Is this thing, the National Unity and Prosperity Act, a realistic blueprint for a totally new, more fair American economy? Or is it just a design that's so big, so ambitious, that actually making it happen in the real world is, well, just a fantasy? That's the big question, and that's the thought I'll leave you with.